Honourable Member, I just want to take this opportunity to remind all members in the House that there are certain descriptors members can use, but they cannot claim to be an electorate member when they are a list member. And I just alert members that is becoming an increasing problem that I'm having to deal with, and I am going to have to deal with it, but members cannot refer to themselves as being a member for an electorate when they are not. Melissa Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The first I heard about the Japanese earthquake was sitting with a group of young professional Koreans at our monthly gathering in Auckland, as you do when you get together talking about, the everyday life. And we were on that particular occasion discussing the experiences of some of the young people who had actually travelled to Christchurch and seeing the devastation there. It was via Twitter, social network, that I actually heard that there was an earthquake in Japan. I didn't really take too much notice, as I know that Japan had regular tremors. Then my son actually rang me to say that there was disaster in Japan, and he said he was recording it, and there was slight panic in his voice. I had no idea of the enormity of this disaster, but when I actually got home, I just sat in front of that television, eyes glued to the TV, our mouth wide open in utter disbelief at the sheer force and speed in which the magnitude 9 earthquake and the subsequent tsunami struck Japan. The imagery of a car stuck on a roof, the boats on top of houses and factories will remain with me for a long, long time. And my heart goes out to the people of Japan. I take this opportunity to pay my respects to the people, the victims and their families in Japanese. 今回の大地震や大津波で壊滅的な被害に遭われた日本の方々に心よりお悔やみを申し上げたいと思います。Kātangi ahau. The Japanese disaster doesn't in any way diminish our own earthquake in Christchurch. We have all been affected, and most of us have family or friends who have lost loved ones in Christchurch. I personally have friends on the missing list from the CTV site, and I have a girlfriend who ran a Japanese restaurant in the middle of Christchurch CBD who was actually trapped, and she had to be rescued. I also had friends whose house were, as they said it, completely munted, and it was days before we could actually get hold of them, and the frustration at which we couldn't actually call them, and we didn't know if they were alive or dead, whether they were hurt. I mean, those kinds of grief, those kinds of anxiety we all have felt. It's a devastating time for all, particularly for the people in Christchurch and the wider Canterbury area. Having lived through the disaster, the rescue efforts, and now the recovery, cleanup, and the rebuild of the Garden City. I was in Christchurch a week after the earthquake as our senior whip was cleaning up. I was very, very impressed that he actually drove his ute down to Christchurch to actually put his muscles to work. I too headed out to lend a hand in New Brighton, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Christchurch Korean community headed by Kevin Park, the president, for their hard work, because on the day I was in New Brighton, there were at least 50 to 60 Korean young men and women who actually rolled their sleeves up to go and help in areas that was most affected. This is when their own homes were cracked, affected by the earthquake, and yet they were out there cleaning up the silt. They were doing that. Korean churches were providing lunches for these volunteers. And I just found today that, as Chris said, in the area that he was actually working, there were other Korean young men and women who were volunteering their time and their energy, helping each other. It didn't matter that they weren't Koreans. They were out there just helping each other. And one of the things that I will most remember about this earthquake is on the day that I was actually using my very limited muscle strength to shovel silt, I was walking out to go to help with a Korean father who had lost 2 children, 24 and 21-year-old children who were studying at the CTV building. And as I was walking out to the car park, there was an elderly gentleman, probably in his 80s, who was devastated at something that actually happened. He was so frustrated that someone had driven past his house more than 5 k's an hour, because that was the only thing he could actually control in his life. He had made up a sign saying 5 k's. And all I could do was just say, "Can I please give you a hug?" And he cried. I felt I did something good. All the workers who've actually done the job in Christchurch, I pay my respects, and I thank the leadership that the Prime Minister has shown through this disaster, one of the biggest this country has faced. Thank you.
A point of order, Carol Beaumont.